Welcome back. I'm Adrienne, your expert on all things custom home building and luxury. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Tell a friend how much fun we have on the Frazier Homes channel. So today we're talking about beware of cheap. Yes, indeed. So, how often have you felt dissatisfied after being lured in by the blowout sale only to realize that there's not much going on the sales floor? And that happens in the building community, construction, where builders will provide you with a cheap price up front only for you to discover that there were some things that were missed. So today I am giving you the tools that you need so that you can be successful when you are thinking about building your fully custom home and understanding that cheap doesn't mean that you are actually getting a deal. So let's start with cheap. Oftentimes it results in cheap assumptions. So what does that mean? That means that we assume that you're going to not have a fully tiled floor in your shower. You might have a pan floor in your shower, okay? We assume that you're going to have the minimum PSI in your foundation instead of the stronger PSI that Frazier Homes demands, and we will not put anything less in our homes. Cheaper assumptions are that maybe you're going to have vinyl windows versus real wood windows, and the list goes on. So while you might be getting something that looks very pretty, it might not have the level of quality that you are hoping to achieve when you were building your fully custom home. Now, cheap isn't cheap, what it means is delayed costs. So a lot of times in the construction industry, what happens is you get a bait and switch where you have this cheap price that you received, but then all of a sudden you are met with loads of change orders. Now, I think it's important to note that all builders are assuming, okay, when it comes down to particularly your selections, there's no way that we can know exactly what you're going to choose unless you are working with a semi-custom or production builder where you pick from their catalog of selections. You go to their showroom and you know upfront exactly what the cost is. With Frazier Homes, we don't have a showroom for you to visit and ultimately make selections because that goes against the fully custom design and it's not on par with our brand. So there are some assumptions, but it's really important that you're communicating with your builder up front about what is very important to you. And this is where we can allocate dollars to your budget. So if you have to have a Wolf or a Viking appliance package, that means we need to increase the budget on that line item. And we're happy to do that because we believe in transparency and we are not trying to make our dollars on change orders. So that's the second point, is that many builders will make their dollars. They will have a lower margin when they're starting off with their cheap allure, and then you have quite a few change orders, and this is where they're making up the gap. That is not Frazier Homes' philosophy. Okay, so unrealistic allowances sometimes is what gets you in a little bit of a snaggle, but this is why you're here at learning the difference, where you can be educated on how to combat that while you're setting your budget. It's very important that you're honest about your budget, and we will link the episode below where we talk about being honest with your builder actually saves you a little bit of money. Okay, so cheap bids assume perfect conditions. So this is another reason why cheap is not always, it's a little bit of a myth, maybe something that you want to look at. So what are we thinking about perfect conditions? Well, we're talking about site conditions. We're talking about soil. We're talking about structural beams. We're talking about basic cabinetry. We're talking about limited electrical. You have to understand with a Frazier home, you are picking everything. The number of can lights. Well, if you go with the cheaper option, you might get the bare minimum of lighting in your home versus what you would get with Frazier homes, where you get to establish the mood for your home. Okay? Cheap bids attract cheap subcontractors. So we just did an episode of how we do not allow any subcontractor on our job because it goes against our luxury philosophy. And so if I'm getting cheap bids, that means that I have to have cheap labor to go along with it. So it's important that you recognize that, because then when you're looking at the quality, you might frown upon that a little bit, but you were excited about the cheap price up front and then didn't get the good quality on the back end. Okay, the next one is low price builders, and we talked about that, survive on change orders. So we don't have to get too deep into that different category, but it's important for you to understand that if I'm just trying to get the job and I'm doing anything to get the job, but back to that bait and switch philosophy, it's not something that feels good. Okay, so the final thing is cheap prices may cost you long term. Okay, it generally does. And just think about if you have a garment that you love, it's a cheap garment, but then you put it in the washing machine and it starts unraveling and gets all frazzled and yucky. Well, you spent the money on the cheap piece versus saving up your money a little bit or spending the extra money on the higher quality material. And that's exactly what you should expect when you are building a fully custom luxury home. And so when you are considering what builder you are going to decide to align with and you're going to decide to award the work with, make sure that the only factor is not financial, because if it is, it means you don't know the difference.